Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah,
Can you hear the applause?
No, I missed all that. It must have been earlier. I heard some people screaming, "Why him? Why him?"
What are you watching, Colin?
Huh?
What were you watching?
No. I have a applause effect.
Oh, Jesus. Are we now Howard Stern?
Yeah, there you go.
Mic drops coming?
You got to grow your hair a little bit if you're going to be Howard Stern.
Yeah. Okay.
Hey, John.
Coach, how are you this evening?
I'm doing well. How about you?
I'm very blessed, sir. Very blessed.
Good. I wore this just for you because I knew there was going to be some Detroit stuff in the background.
I like it.
So, Colin, I got to ask, are you drinking a vodka and ginger ale?
No. We're on this podcast. I thought it's parent, we're friendly here, whatever.
That's only on second thoughts.
Yeah.
Second thoughts is we drink on second thoughts.
Well, if I had one with me, I'd give a toast to John Prine. Listening when I get to heaven a lot of times over the last 24, 48 hours. So rest in peace, John Prine. I know that he was one of your favorites, Colin. So I just wanted to check. Are you still looking for that Great Days CD?
I got it somewhere, I think. Oh, here it is. Right there.
Yeah.
Right there.
Nice.
Great CD.
Well, let's jump into this. Coach Kimball, thanks for joining us. Have you had a chance to watch any of these episodes yet and know what we're doing here?
Yeah, I haven't watched the whole one all the way through, but I've watched 2 or 3 different parts of them. So they're pretty cool. I think it's a great idea.
Well, thank you. We're getting a lot of very positive feedback from people that, not realizing that we do have lacrosse up in Traverse City or that Ovid LC existed and some of this stuff. So
yeah, that was fun. I watched quite a bit of the Pat Witt one, and that was cool because he's working really hard to make that program go. And I wish him all the best. He plays in our league now. He's in a co-op with St. John's, which I think is going to help him get some more kids. So yeah, it's hard to get it going, but once you do, hopefully it'll stay around.
Well,
yeah, that was a fun one.
Mike Van Antwerp reached out to me and said I didn't know that he was lacking equipment and needs some coaching support. So he said he was going to recruit you and reach out to Pat together to go up there and do a coach's clinic for the parents.
Yeah, I mean, and that's stuff that both Mike and I love to do, and so that would be no problem. I think Pat's problem is he's got to try and get a youth program going to feed the high schools, his high school and St. John's.
Yeah.
And it's just so hard because there are not very many coaches up here.
Right. Yeah, that's what he said. That was his biggest thing. He just needed a couple of parents to jump in, step in, get involved, and it goes from there. So that was one of his biggest things.
It is, I lost my assistant coach from last year, who played at Lansing Catholic when I was the assistant and still being the athletic director, and I lured him back away from Hazlitt, and then Hazlitt lured him back. So I didn't find another coach until the week before the season started.
Oh, wow.
So I had 4 days with him to try and get on the same page, and it was good. I mean, he played at Alma. He's a really good defenseman, and he's coached in some club in summer, so he had some coaching experience, which was nice. But I'll tell you what, from fall until then, I thought I was going to be coaching by myself.
Wow. That's just rough at it's rough at any level, especially the varsity level.
Yeah, you can't do it. You got too many kids out there, and it's just too hard to do. One person can't do it all.
It's like herding cattle.
Yeah,
in a lot of cases. So, Coach Kimball, we never really have an agenda for this. We normally, if we have somebody new, we ask them where they're coaching, what they're doing. I think everyone knows you, former Michigan State varsity NCAA Division I head coach, current coach Lansing Catholic Central, MHLCA U.S. Lacrosse Hall of Famer, U.S. Lacrosse Michigan Chapter Hall of Famer. Your resume is pretty clean and pretty impressive. We don't really have an agenda, but I kind of wanted to ask you, we could hammer on Michigan State in the glory days of varsity. We could hammer on the history of the program being shunted. We could hammer on your current program. We could go down memory lane with other stuff. Is there anything that you really have been waiting for somebody to stick a mic in your face and ask you about?
No, I mean, I'm willing to talk about all those kind of things, but I'd say this to you first because it's 7 o'clock tonight. I was on a Zoom webinar put on by Deemer Class, who runs first class lacrosse he's out on the West Coast, and He had Matt Dunn on there, who played defense at Maryland and plays in the PLL. And the point of that, I guess, is that there are so many coaches out there that are giving back to the game right now and doing things. The College Coaches Association is run a webinar once a week with different people. And not all of it lacrosse. One with John O'Grady talking about how to deal with kids. And there's just content out there. And it's I don't know if you guys know Jamie Monroe at all, but you know, he's made his program. So I bought into his program last summer, August or whatever. So if you bought into that program as a coach, you can now pass all that on to your kids and they can all watch that for free. So people have dumped a lot of content out there and it's been really fun. Jerry Byrne at Harvard has a great thing going on. Every day he and his coaches do a thing they call one clip, one drill. And the first day was great. They had clips from the PLL and Jerry analyzed it from a defensive perspective with Miles Jones dodging and what do you do and how do you do it. And they've done some two real good goaltending ones. They've done some offensive clips with his offensive coordinator. So, you know, for me, you know, I'm retired and all I'm doing is coaching. So it gives me a chance to sit down and watch some stuff that I might otherwise not get to see. And I think it's great that our community is and the lacrosse community as a whole has stepped up to the plate in trying to get more information out on the game and how it's played to make it better. And for people in Michigan and coaches and that kind of thing, it's a great resource just to learn more.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I laugh because I've been cleaning out my den going through stuff, and I still have, you know, the DVDs on, you know, winning lacrosse with Jeff Chambroni and the Mark Millen Shooting Academy and all this stuff.
That one's good. The Mark Millen one stands up the test of time.
You know, when I transitioned from player to coach, let's be honest, I wasn't even that good of a player. My skills and my fundamentals were awful. I just ran around and hit people. So now I've got all these 5th and 6th and 7th and 8th graders, and I got to teach them how to throw and catch. Yeah. I had to learn how to throw and catch. So this is the kind of stuff that I wish we would have had in Michigan back in, as Flojo was picking me. Druin knows exactly what happened in 1987. But, you know, this is the resources that are out there. And so I really hope that some of these programs like a Pat Witt, if they can get their parents online learning some of this stuff from the best and the resources that are out there, and then have somebody like you and Van Antwerp come up and actually do the tweaks and help them, you know, finesse it a little bit. I think there's going to be some really good opportunities for those kids.
I think so too. And you know, when I was on the webinar last week with Hebert and Comiscus and Brubaker, and there were 6 of us on there. And one of the things we talked about that I picked up is, you know, I'm struggling in my youth program right now with not very big numbers. And Lansing Catholic football team is struggling with their youth numbers.
Really?
They didn't have a JV team. They didn't have an 8th grade team. And it's, you know, they won a state championship in their division, which is outstanding. We got a phenomenal coach who's been doing it for a lot of years, and he does everything the right way. But we can't get kids to play football, and we're struggling to get kids to play lacrosse. So what I started last week, because our youth program only got about, I think they might have had 1 or 2 practices before everything got shut down. And so our 3rd and 4th graders, it's only the 2nd year we've had a 3rd and 4th grade program. And most of those kids were new. All the 3rd graders in it were new. And the 4th graders played a year last year, and a couple of those kids were new. So I started doing Zoom clinics with them. And I've done 2 for the 3rd and 4th. I did my first one today for the 5th and 6th. But in order for it to happen, I've told the parents there has to be 1 parent out there for each kid. They're in their own backyard and that kind of thing. So now what I've done is I've dubbed all those parents as coaches. And I said, the very first day, I said, here's the deal. I said, I can see them, but I can't see them as well as you can see them. So you got to listen to me and critique them. And I can watch them one at a time and expand them up on full screen and see them. But I'm missing the other kids at that same time. So I said, just understand that while you're doing this, and it's for the benefit of your kid, it's also because you all are going to be in our coaching staff next year.
Yeah.
You know, you're going to be one of the people that's going to be on the field with your kid. Smart. When your 3rd grader is a 4th grader, you're going to be coaching with whoever the club appointed coaches, you're going to be the assistant coach, and you're going to be out there doing this stuff, and you're going to know it so that you can make these kids better too. And if we get more kids, then we have a bigger coaching staff and all that kind of stuff. So it's
Smart.
It's a great time to be doing stuff to build your program, but for all the wrong reasons. Understand?
Coach, do you mind?
For sure.
Could you post? Can we post that on this? Because I think for every community that wants a youth program, what you're doing, that's what everyone should be doing right now, don't you think?
Yeah, it's not a hard thing to do, and I haven't done it yet. The MHSA today said the season's closed. You can now work with your kids via virtual clinics or whatever you want to call them. So I can't do 7th and 8th graders. I haven't been able to go into this. I go into the schools in the fall and the early winter, and I work with 3rd and 4th, 5th and 6th and all the schools that feed our program, from Waverly, Lansing Christian, and the Catholic schools in the greater Lansing area, but I can't touch 7th and 8th graders. So I have one 8th grader coming into my program next year. That's it. I've got 6 others that are 7th graders this year that will be 8th graders, but I've got to bump that number up. I'm not going to have a JV team next year. We graduate 12 kids. I've got 10 more seniors that'll graduate next year. If I don't get more kids in my program, I'm not going to have a program in 2 years. So it's survival mode at this point in time to be able to do it. And it's I think we're missing the boat if we don't, because in the clinics that I've done, it's been starting right down, and they've had a little bit of coaching because I've worked with them. All these kids have been in the gym classes I've coached in, but we went right back to where do you put your hands on the stick, how you keep the hand up, the stick up by your head. We talk about how to cradle. We talk about how to throw, and we go through this throwing motion. In the first couple, we didn't get real far, and we got as far as teaching them just a face dodge and the footwork. And then I sent them, after I was done with that, I sent them 2 videos, one from Kyle Harrison. There was a U.S. Lacrosse one. It's a little bit older, but the techniques are great. And one on a roll dodge from IMG. So, they can see it on video, and they can't really see me do it very well when they're watching me and I'm in and out of the screen. I got the camera tipped too high, too low, whatever. But, we can walk them through it, and their folks are learning that too. So I think anybody that's a high school coach or runs a youth program can get these kids on Zoom, and it's a great, or any platform that will do this. It's a great way to work with these kids. And while I've paid great attention to my high school team, and we meet once a week at least now on Zoom, and I text 4 or 5 different kids every day and ask them how they're doing and demand answers back, and that kind of thing. So, but the 3rd and 4th and 5th and 6th grade kids and 7th and 8th grade kids who have lost a season, I don't know that anybody's paying attention to those kids. And the parents of the 3rd and 4th that have done it twice are all excited about it, partly because they tell me when they want to do it. You want to do it 1 in the afternoon? You want to do it 6 at night? They all want to do it in the afternoon because they're all working from home, and they all want to get the kids out of the house.
Yeah.
So, but the good thing is they go out of the house with them.
Yeah, it's innovative, Coach. I mean, I always say, through adversity, there's an opportunity, and really what you're doing is innovative, and you're utilizing the circumstances that we have to really, break it down to that very basic level where you're going through things that you probably, when you've got, 15 or 18 or 20 of them in a practice with, 3rd and 4th or 5th and 6th graders, you would never get that level of attention to detail.
You're right.
Going to get this way. And then the second part is that you're getting the parents involved early. Yeah. So then that facilitates, hey, get a friend, you bring a friend, hey, you parent. And the next thing you know, that's how you build it from the ground up.
Well, and I think you have to, and I say this to my high school parents all the time. They said, what was that I saw out there tonight? What were you doing that was different? And I said, I can't tell you that. It's top secret. And I start laughing. They say, what do you mean it's top secret? I said, well, if I tell you what I'm doing, then you're going to figure out how it's wrong. And then you're going to do nothing except cheer for your kids. Now you're going to be yelling at me. So I'm going to get the youth parents, and I'm going to teach them. And when the kids get to high school, I'm going to be in big trouble.
Yeah.
Very cool.
I wanted to share something real quick. I commend you for what you're doing. We actually tried to do a Zoom Cub Scout meeting today, and it was chaos. Like, you to expect your point, it needs to be one kid, one parent, because if not, they're all changing their backgrounds and screaming jokes and goofing around. So these are third grade boys that my son's Cub Scout troop, and it was they needed it to see each other, kind of that first one, to get the silliness out, because they haven't been in class together for 3-4 weeks now. But all but one of these kids actually plays lacrosse for me too. So we're going to start doing some stuff like that, some virtual practices with them. So yeah, it's going to be a lot of wall ball drills and a lot of dads with probably baseball mitts, but we're going to have to get them out there.
Well, that's what I've told their parents. I said, I don't expect you to have to pick up a lacrosse stick and do it, but if you got a glove, put a baseball glove on, and you can just throw it and catch it with the glove and do that. It doesn't have to be perfect or anything else like that, but you need to be out there doing something with your kids, which is great because you're all stuck in the house all day, or supposedly, and it'll be some quality time with your kids and quality time, maybe learning the game a little bit, and I'm gonna walk you through it and tell you all that kind of stuff, and and Zoom is great, and one of the things I realized yesterday, I was teaching 5th and 6th graders the footwork of a face dodge, and they just weren't getting it very quickly. And a couple of them were, and some of them weren't. So I said, oh yeah, we got a whiteboard feature on Zoom, so you can pull the whiteboard up, and now you can draw the lines and the angles, and they can see it much better. So that's kind of cool as well. So I think it's just a lot of work to be done up in this area, and probably everywhere for youth kids. But in this area, without a lot of coaches who know what they're doing and can do a good job with these kids, you just gotta train the parents, because they're going to be the ones that will be at every game. So if they're going to be at every game, they might as well be on the bench, and then you can have a little more control over them, and they'll maybe help your kids grow a little bit faster.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is, just to add on to that from a parent, son perspective, I got a lot of friends out there, and everyone's like, people are starting to lose it a little bit. I mean, we're 2 weeks into this, and people are getting a little wacky, and I keep telling everybody, I said, listen, your kids are going to remember this time frame for the rest of their lives, and they're always going to think back to this because it's a historic time, and they're always going to remember how you acted as a parent. How did you handle it? And so to dovetail into what you're talking about, if you can build lacrosse into this memory, they'll always have that bond between between the father and the son, where they started really picking up lacrosse. And it's really kind of taking a bad situation in our country and adding a little nugget kind of in that they'll remember for the rest of their lives. Very cool.
Let's hope. And I think the same thing, Chris, would be true with your Cub Scout meeting. Have a parent in the room with them, and let the kids be goofy at the beginning, because when I text my kids, my freshmen, sophomores, juniors, seniors, and ask them how they're doing and this and that, or what do they miss, it's their contact with their friends. I miss my friends, and they're so much better at what we're doing right now than we are. They can do all the technology, and they can Snapchat, and they can put things on Instagram, but they just miss being there in the same room, in the same house, in the same school, wherever it might be, and that's hard for them. And I feel bad for them at all levels, even the young kids. I mean, I talk to my grandkids who are 14 and 12, and that's the one thing they say every time. I said, what are you doing? Well, I'm on the computer, I'm doing schoolwork, I'm watching television, I'm outside, But I said, was that all good? They said, yeah, that's all good, but I can't be with any of my buddies.
Yeah.
So when you bring all those Cub Scouts together, you're doing a great thing. You just got to figure out how to get the parent in the room too, so it's a little less chaotic for you.
There's two kind of new social norms that I'm seeing. One of my best friends, there's a couple families that my wife and I are really close with. Their kids call us aunt and uncle, that kind of things. We all live up here in Clarkston. It was my buddy Mike Collins' birthday yesterday. So we went on a walk, we went on our bike ride, did all our exercise, and I said, you know what? Call Coballs, tell them to meet us on Collins' Street in 5 minutes. We're going to sing him happy birthday.
There you go.
On their cul-de-sac, we opened the doors in the minivans, we honked the horns, and they came outside, and we sang him happy birthday.
That's awesome.
It's my godson is Mike Collins' son, and Mike and his wife Libby are my son Gannon's godparents. It's like, you missed that.
Yes.
And the other thing I'm seeing around here now is you'll drive by the high school or something, and I'm not leaving the house much, but you'll see 3 or 4 cars all kind of backed into a circle, and the tailgate's up, and they're sitting in their tailgates, social distance, hanging out.
Yeah, and I some people are going to get angry at those 4 cars backed up, but you know what? They're kids. You gotta let them do some stuff.
Yeah.
And you gotta find a way for them to be able to do it. And I think if that's what it is, and they're respecting the rules and everything else, don't kick them out right away. Let them stay there and come back in half an hour if you have to, and kick them out. If you're a cop or whatever. So.
Just my daughter, who's 10, is now starting to get into the whole Facebook Messenger thing. And normally we'd get somebody to try to be getting a hold of her at 6 o'clock. Like, no, that's dinner time. Like, no, it's family time. Now it's like, you haven't seen that girl in 8 days. Go talk to her. Go, socialize and be normal.
Yep. Exactly.
I wanted to transition away from some of the COVID and high school stuff and actually ask you a bunch of questions about Michigan State, if that's okay.
Sure.
So, how is your relationship with the university today?
It's not one that I pay much attention to. I have some good friends that still work over there. Some people that were coaching when I was coaching are there, and I will see them on occasion, or if I see they get a big win or something like that, I'll send them a note and that kind of thing. But, it was – and my wife works here, so – my relationship with them, as long as I give her paycheck all the time, is very good. But I struggle with it still. It's the people that were involved with the decision to drop the program are no longer there.
Yeah.
Which is neither good nor bad. I think that my players miss it. I would say since 1997, of the ones I know about, I bet of all the kids who played for me over 18 years, I bet less than 20 have ever come back to campus.
Wow.
Yeah. I would say that, and I don't know this for sure, but I would say probably 95% of them don't donate a penny to the school. I know that some that do, and they're thankful for the education they got, but they'll never donate to the athletic department. They will never. Yeah. That will never be. They'll donate back to their major area and to the school they were in. So, it's not anger anymore. It was for a long time. It's disappointment more than anything now.
Yeah.
The interesting thing is that since we've all been quarantine or stay at home type of stuff, and Facebook has gone through all kinds of things of post this picture of you coaching, and so Mike Jolly, who really takes care of the club year guys from the 60s to 1970, puts a lot out, and I've sent him some stuff that I had in boxes in my attic, and so I posted some pictures from different years and that kind of thing, and the feedback from kids now. Kids are not kids anymore that played for me are posting schedule cards from their senior year, or a couple pictures they had, and it's been really fun, and it's great to hear from these guys, and I hear from a lot of them anyway. But it still breaks your heart, especially the kids that were there in 95, 96, and would have been playing in 97 or 94, all the way up, that would have been playing in 97 and didn't get that opportunity. So had a kid in town named Chris Schaller, who was from Webster, New York, who played for me, and he would have been a sophomore the year they dropped it in 97, and he got out immediately and went to Penn State and played. And he was out here. His wife was a gymnast at Michigan State. So they were coming out to visit some friends from college and that kind of stuff. And so we went out to breakfast with each other and sat for a while. And it was great to see him. I hadn't seen him since he left. We dropped the program on a Wednesday or Tuesday or Wednesday or whatever. And he was gone by Saturday or Sunday.
Oh, wow.
It's the first I've seen him. I've talked to him, but had not seen him. So that was a great reunion. And There's other guys like that. There are a couple that went to Syracuse. And Chris, you probably know Chris Clark. I think he's done some of your games.
Yeah.
He was one of those kids that he and Kevin Sheedy, who was a upstate New York kid, they left and they were gone, and they had their first practice at Syracuse the following Monday. And the great part of that was when Memorial Day came that weekend, both of them were on the roster for the tournament, and Chris actually got into the game on Friday and played a few shifts. And Kevin didn't get in Friday. I think he might have get in. I don't know if they won or lost that game. I can't remember. But as a senior, he made a third-team All-American team. So, and Chris played quite a lot the next year in his senior year. So we had kids go to Maryland, Penn State, Syracuse, Butler, some smaller schools, and those who didn't want to leave because they liked Michigan State, or they didn't think of a school, or they still had their scholarship money guaranteed and they probably weren't going to get any money anywhere else. So, a lot of kids stayed and a lot of kids left, but a lot of them still keep in touch, which I'm very thankful for.
Yeah, you've been all over Facebook lately, more so than even my wife and I, with all these old photos. And this one came up the other day. Do you want to explain this one for us?
No, I don't know. That's a different. That must have been the opposing team.
Oh, okay.
Damned, I was stylish, wasn't I? Huh?
That's a good look.
Woo, baby.
That is a good look, Coach. I got to tell you.
Yeah. Well, listen.
Coming back around.
You guys don't know Blaine Harrison, who coached with me. He was.
I know Blaine.
No.
He was a kid that out of Canada, outside of Toronto, and went to Washington College down in Maryland and hated it. It was too small. It was too far away from home and everything in that. So he dropped out of school and he went back home, and he was working in an air conditioning factory. And he had this dream of always being a chef and owning a restaurant and that kind of stuff. And the manager, the owner, one of them befriended him a little bit, and they would talk about it. And he finally said, "Listen, will you quit doing this? You're wasting your life here. Why don't you go find a school that you can go to that has a hotel restaurant program?" So I'm the head coach, and I'm sitting in my office in the summertime, and it's July, and I think I was getting ready to go to Empire State games or something like that. And this young guy walks into my office and introduces himself and said, "Hey, Coach, my name is Blaine Harrison, and I'm a lacrosse player, and I'm coming to Michigan State in the fall, and I just want to know that if when I'm here, if I can play in your lacrosse team." And so in those days, this is early 80s. It's like, okay, have you ever played before was always my first question.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've played a little bit. And I said, "Well, where did you play?" He said, "Well, I'm a Canadian. I'm from outside of Toronto, and I've been on the Canadian national team in the last World Championships game and played quite a bit. And I'm on the team for the one coming up, and I was 84, 86, whatever it was." And I'm thinking, "Oh, that's great." And I'm going, okay, there's four of my players got to be outside my door that are laughing their butts off, thinking that they're
who put them up to it.
Right? So I'm going, that's great. Yeah, listen, how old are you, and what have you done for college? And I asked all the right questions. Well, I went for a year, but I think I probably only have 1 or 2 years of eligibility left because I've been out of school, and the clock started running as it does for 5 years to play 4 and that kind of thing. So I said, "Well, okay, listen. You got to go back to Canada today, drive home, be safe, come see me when you get back off in campus." And I didn't realize that I looked around for something and to see, okay, what do I got that says anything about the Canadian national team? Well, Brian in those days did a big yearbook, and they covered all the teams, and they had stuff on the World Games in it. And son of a gun, if his name wasn't on the roster. And I'm going, you got to be kidding me. This kid might actually be a real lacrosse player. This could be fun. So
Legit.
He was a tremendous asset to our team as a player. I mean, he was a really good defenseman for Canada. But he played midfield for us. He's also a really good short stick as well, and scored a bunch of goals. But he was a kid, and this is the days when we're riding 15-passenger vans to wherever we go, right? So he would get in the van. The first thing he would do is take a stick apart, and the guys are sitting in the van that have played a year or two in high school, or maybe 3 or 4 years in high school, but have never learned how to work their stick. And so he takes his stick apart, and an hour later he gets it all back together, and he's got a ball in his chair and a seat with him, or on the floor, and he's throwing it up and down, hitting it off the roof of the van, and I go, what are you doing? He said, I just got to make sure the pocket's good. And the next thing you know, 6 coming back. And that team, that year, in the next 2 years that he coached, through 2 or 3 years that he coached me, every kid in our team learned how to take their stick apart and put it back together in a van ride going to somewhere. And now you look at kids, and they can't take a stick apart and put it back together. And when they complain about it, they don't know what to do. So it was just a great culture thing for us. And he stayed and coached. He played with the Turbos, good friends with the Martinellos. He went and trying to think if he was assistant coach in Philadelphia or played. He was the head coach in New England for a couple of years. And then he was down into, was it the Georgia Swarm, I think, in the indoor league. So he coached a lot of indoor lacrosse, and now he's back in Grand Rapids and on the road on a sales job all the time. So he doesn't have time to coach, but if this summer thing opens up and we can get kids together in the summer, he and I will probably put a camp together over in Grand Rapids this summer.
Nice, yeah. Between him and Adam Mueller, you've got 2 former NLL coaches that you've coached.
Yeah, very much so, and more kids. Johnny Lancey, who was went to Canisius as assistant, and then went down to St. Andrews, and then was the assistant coach at Duke when the whole scandal hit, and he's now coaching down at Durham Academy. He played in the league, and had some other kids that played for Jeff Sinelli, who owns the Which sandwich chain, who's a Catholic Central kid out of Detroit. So there were a handful of guys that actually got a chance to play indoors, and some of them had some pretty good careers at it too. So
that's great. Yeah, the reason why I brought up the thing with Michigan State and your relationship there is my dad's a born and raised Lansing guy, put himself through Michigan State working at the Oldsmobile factory. I mean, you don't get much more Lansing than my dad.
No, you don't.
And he's been on all these message boards back when Jim Comparoni used to have a 976 number that you could call and get Spartan recruiting updates. So my dad has kind of brought that Spartan fandom into me. We go on these Spartan mag boards, and every time somebody brings up lacrosse, somebody chimes in and says, well, when's Michigan State going to get their act together and bring it back? And they should get Kimball back, and those players should start raising money. And I go, guys, I think a lot of those players needed an apology and somebody to reach out to them for something more than a check. Like the answer isn't asking these guys for money. The answer is making amends in the first place.
Well, you're right. I mean, they're never going to get an apology because nobody that should apologize is still there.
Fair point.
In their mind, they called it a Title IX thing. It was the fact they cut the sport, number one, but number two, it was in the way they did it. The lies they told, the way they treated the players. The athletic director had a meeting set up with me for Friday morning at 8 a.m. And at that point in time, I had somebody inside tip me off and say they're going to drop your program. I learned that on Tuesday. So Tuesday night, I told my players, and we practiced from 9 to 11 at night in the indoor turf at Duffy. And I waited till after practice, and it was ugly. It was emotional. I said, guys, I can't guarantee this, but I said, I'm 99% sure this is what we're going to hear. So on Wednesday night, the athletic director went, women's basketball had a game against somebody really good, somebody from the South. I don't think it was Baylor, but it could have been somebody of that caliber, a top 5 team in the country. And so he called a press conference, and he announced to all the reporters that were there that he was cutting lacrosse. Now, the meeting with me wasn't until Friday. We practiced early that night because there was a basketball game, and so we could get in. And so I was home and just climbing into bed at probably 11 o'clock, and about 15 minutes later, the phone rings, and it's my son calling and says, hey, you got to turn the news on. And I said, why? He said, because they just announced that they're dropping your program effective at the end of the season. And he said, they got reporters in houses where your players live off campus, and they're asking them questions.
Oh, dear.
I'm going, holy mackerel. So, by the time I got on, it was over. It was a short blurb and that kind of thing. So I go into work the next day on Thursday morning, and I go to the administrator that I deal with. And I said, are you kidding me? I said, this is how you guys are going to do this now. And this guy was a friend of mine, and and he still is to this day. He's retired now. He's not there anymore. But, he was very good. He just let me lay into him, and it wasn't his doing. But he let me lay into him and get rid of the steam and that kind of stuff. And so Friday morning, I go in at 8 o'clock in the meeting. If the meeting lasted 5 minutes, I'd be surprised.
Wow.
It was we've cut your program as you learn. I said, yeah, nice to be a press conference. I said, way to treat my players with respect. I said, you can hate me if you want, but you owe some respect to those players. I said, are you going to meet with them and talk to them? Oh, yeah, we're going to meet with them at 4 o'clock this afternoon.
Students.
Students,
not just players. Again, students.
Yeah. Why aren't you meeting with them right after you talk to me? Why didn't you meet with them on Thursday after what you did Wednesday night? And he said, you'll get paid through the end of the year, turn your keys in on the 1st of June, and otherwise you're done. You're done at the end of the season. So that night, Wednesday night, we had practice. Not Wednesday night. On Thursday night, we had practice. And so the kids all sat and talked. It wasn't a practice. It was just sitting around in a emotional mess fest.
Therapy practice.
And that's when the kids stood up and said, Coach, we love you, but we're not playing for this university. And I said, you know what? If that call is up to you, not to me. I said, I'm going to get paid regardless of whether we play or not. Okay? And you guys are going to get your scholarships regardless whether you play or not. So they all voted. It was unanimous. There wasn't one kid that wanted to play for Michigan State at that point in time. And to this day, I don't think they understand what they caused for that group of 40, 45 lacrosse players, whatever it was at that point in time. And that's why they don't come back. And that's why they don't give money, because of the way they were treated. There were so many different ways to do it, and that was the one way that you couldn't do it, So, yeah, it was interesting. And to get to your question, will it come back? And can you raise money from these guys now with 30, 20-something, 25 years or whatever it is, or coming up, they will donate to bring a program back. But the issue now becomes so a couple of my former players put together an initiative and met with Mark Hollis and said, would you bring lacrosse back if we fund it? And he said, let me think about it. And, finally the $8 million tab got thrown out to start the program, put a little bit to the endowment. And the guy said, $8 million. Okay, that's not going to come easy, but let's see what we can do. And within a month, they had $8 million worth of pledges.
Wow.
Went back, and the price tag raised itself to $18 million. And they all got up and walked out of the room. So, and so now when you look at the bigger scope, in 1997, I think the athletic budget at Michigan State was $18 million to run all the programs. Now, there's the thing I saw somewhere in the last month or two, the athletic budgets of every school in the Big Ten. And I'm not going to get this right, but I think Michigan and Ohio State were over $200 million. I think Michigan State was somewhere between 150 and $190 million athletic department. And so I'm thinking, okay, the change you round off could start a lacrosse program. Except, I think what's hurt, a couple things have hurt. You now have 6 teams in the Big Ten with Hopkins in there. So now you have a league championship sport, so you don't need a 7th team. And then you look at what Michigan built, and I'm sure you guys have been there and seen it. If you look at what Penn State has done, and I've only seen pictures of that, and you read about what Ohio State is doing, building a stadium for lacrosse, I think it's going to be similar to U of M in terms it's going to hold 3,000, 4,000, 5,000, something like that. And it'll probably be on their North Campus, I think, where all the practice fields are and the locker rooms and that kind of thing. It's like where their Duffy Doherty Center is, and it's a little ways away from campus, from the Horseshoe and that kind of thing. So when you look at that, and Hopkins has refurbished a lot of their stuff, I mean, they're never going to have a bigger stadium than what they have.
Yeah.
Based on the fact they're a Division III program playing Division I lacrosse. So, you know, I don't know how Rutgers renovated their stadium a few years ago, and I think
they're redoing all their locker rooms and everything.
Who is?
Training facility. Rutgers is right now.
Yeah.
They're going to have next year something that's pretty, I think, nicer than what Michigan has.
Yeah, wow. And so if you look at Michigan State and say, okay, number one, where are you going to put a lacrosse field on campus? Because it won't go into the football stadium because there's spring football, and that's grass, and they're not going to let lacrosse practice on the grass every day. So, you know, they have an outdoor pool that has no water in it and will not have water in it until they find the money to either build it or tear it apart, which I don't think that's in the plans anytime soon. So their Big Ten swimming program swims in a 25-meter pool, and everybody else swims in 50-meter pools. So are they ahead of lacrosse? I certainly would think so. So you'd have to put it somewhere south of campus, which you don't really want to do at Michigan State's campus. You want it where the kids can walk to it. Your students will be your fans for the first several years until it gets to be big time and that kind of stuff. So it's got to be accessible for them. So Munn Field, but I don't know if it's an intramural field. It's got a turf on it that's used by intramurals and by band, but it's not. I don't think it's not wide enough for a lacrosse field. There's a lot of room left out there if you wanted to take that field and make that into a lacrosse area and tie weight rooms and stuff in with a hockey building with Munn Arena. You could do that, but I don't think they're going to do that anytime soon, and I don't think they have $70 million to do it with if you just want to look at Michigan's price tag.
Yeah.
You know, you could build a pretty nice building and field for $50 million or $40 million or $30 million and still be in the race, but I don't think they're going to spend that kind of money to bring a lacrosse program back that they haven't had for 20 some odd years.
There was
it's either money or it's enrollment, and Michigan State doesn't have an enrollment problem.
Nope.
As all the other schools that typically have added lacrosse in the last decade have had. You look at Oakland University, that's a facilities issue. If they had locker rooms, and I mean they have fields, but they don't have enough facilities to just let's add 50 student athletes to our athletic ledger and a locker room to put them in and all that kind of stuff, and weight room facilities that would fit. So it really has to be a sweet spot to add lacrosse nowadays. I think.
You have to have somebody come in with the really big money who's going to say, okay, here's myself and my partner, and we're going to give you $50 million if you add lacrosse. Well, you know, the attitude would change very quickly, I think, if that happened.
Yeah.
But I don't think –
that's what John Paul did, right?
Yeah, well, I don't know if John Paul did. What's the name? Ross, it's from Florida, that gave him $200 million to upgrade their facilities, and part of that went to lacrosse. So I don't know. There's nobody in my alumni base that's going to write a check for $50 million. So
I thought for sure Dameron and Van Antwerp were going to cover the whole nut.
Van Antwerp's tight. Dameron probably would have it, but he already spent it. So
I jokingly picked two teachers. And I know when John Paul was interviewed about Michigan, he said they made a decision early in the club days when they were recruiting kids to come play at Michigan. They were recruiting wealth with the attitude of, if these kids can come from the East Coast to Michigan to play, and they come from families of influence and of affluence, we can then reach out to them when we start getting this going. And it was really part of the overall strategy there. The other thing too at State, and getting back to what Chris said with facilities and everything, I was on I don't remember if it was a Twitter or a live chat, something with Mark Hollis at one point in the last 10 years. And I directly asked the program and said, asked the question, what would it take for lacrosse to become part of the conversation again? And his answer was very quick and just very direct. We have to fully fund the athletic endowment before we'll consider anything. Because I think in his mind, the way that you raise money is you have the endowment taking more Rose Bowls and Final Four trips. And if those two are successful and the big two are successful, enrollment goes up, fundraising goes up, ticket sales go up, and in the wake of all the money that's going to be spent out on the Nassar lawsuits and scandal, I hate to be the turd in the punch bowl, but I don't see it happening anytime in the next decade.
when you've got $170 million athletic budget, and it's predicated on ticket sales, mainly at basketball and football, and donations, and that kind of thing. Unless somebody once again writes that big check, you're never going to put enough aside. The cost of scholarships is going up every year. They're losing. All the Big Ten schools are losing big money from the Big Ten for not having a Big Ten tournament this year. That's going to impact everybody's budget to the tune of anywhere from $2 to $5 million. And you might be able to eat part of that, but there's going to be some cuts. And when you just have to pay the football and basketball and hockey coaches more and more to stay and get the ones you want, that eats away at anything that you're going to have put away. So I think it's got to be a group that's going to come together and say, we want this, and we're willing to pay for it, and here's your check for the big thing.
Yeah.
2018, 2019 athletic spending in the Big Ten. Michigan State, $136 million, 18-19, that was athletic spend. Ohio State was at the top at $221 million.
Yeah.
Michigan at $191. And then down at the bottom, Purdue at $102 million, Rutgers at $103, Maryland at $109 million. Total annual athletic spending, 2018-19.
That's the same thing. Where'd you find that, John?
I don't know. It's an article in the Cleveland.com.
Okay.
Just from last month. Yeah.
I know what.
That's when I saw it. So I was a little inflated. So 130 million.
That's spending. So it doesn't say what their budget is, whether they have a surplus or a deficit at that given year. So that's essential.
They've in their defense, I don't want to rip them all the time. In their defense, they seem to have a surplus every year. They're one of the ones that balance their budget and have a little surplus. I mean, the surplus isn't $10 million surplus. I mean, it might be up at
Ohio State
sitting there right now, and that would get them through this year with the NCAA tournament lack of money coming in from the Final Four and that kind of thing. Yeah. But so they're pretty cautious. I mean, and while the facilities are nice at Michigan State, they're not over the top. They're not certainly
Oregon State,
or Ohio State, or even Michigan. They do well and they're fine, but there's no room in them. I mean, like one of you was just saying, I don't know, to house 45 lacrosse players, there's no locker room. There's no locker room anywhere that's going to house 45 lacrosse players.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
we
ask a fun question? Can I ask a fun
absolutely.
question? So, Coach, during your time at Michigan State, off the something, you don't have to give a name. You don't have to you can use fake names, whatever you want to do. Give me that one off the field incident that just absolutely blew your mind. Don't have to get anybody in trouble. It's probably Cosgrove, but just give me some situation that, Saturday morning or Sunday morning, you're like, oh man, am I really dealing with that? Because
I'll give you
a few.
I'll give you one, and it doesn't involve.
You got to wait about 20 years for me to tell my stories.
Okay, so we're going out to the East Coast to play at Rutgers, and in at times we actually had done a nice job fundraising some money for our team, and at that particular time, airfare to Baltimore was really cheap. So instead of flying to Newark and playing Rutgers, which would have made a lot of sense, we took a school bus, a Michigan State school bus down to the airport, hopped in the plane, flew to Baltimore, rented 3 15-passenger vans, drove up to Newark, which wasn't bad, got there in time to have a workout and played the next day. And so we're staying that night because if I'm thinking maybe we had a night game on Saturday, perhaps. I can't remember. I think so. And so we're staying at a Red Roof Inn in the Baltimore airport. So whatever it was, we got back to the airport, and there was you could see, unfortunately, through the trees if you stood on the balcony of the Red Roof Inn, and it said bar right across. We had a rule for all of our kids that no alcohol on the road. We don't drink in the road. You guys don't drink. I don't drink. you know, from the time we leave school to the time we get back to campus, there's no alcohol involved. So, you know, I'm thinking, okay, I'm in my room. I'm talking to my assistant coach, and we're going over the game, and we're setting a timeline for the next day of getting to the airport and what we're going to do when we get back. Will we have a workout when we get back? Will we give them off till Monday? Will we lift? Whatever we're going to do. And so I said, well, let's go talk to our captains and some of the guys and see what they think. So the doors were all off the balcony, so you could go through, and we had the numbers where the kids are. And one room's got the curtain open, and there's nobody in there. That's okay. That happens all the time. They're in somebody else's room.
Oh, yeah.
You walk down the hallway, there's nobody in any of the rooms. All right. So, you know, you look through the trees, you see this flashing bar sign. And of course, and that night was a big heavyweight fight. And I can't even tell you who it was.
Probably Tyson. Probably Mike Tyson.
Who knows? But so we walk through the trees and we go over to the bar and we walk in the faces of probably 35 lacrosse players just drop. And there's 2 tables of about 8 kids at a table that got pitchers of beer and glasses of beer all in front of them. And the other guys are sitting there and they're not drinking beer. And they're watching the fight and doing that. So it's like, okay, guys, pay your tab. Let's go back to the hotel. We're not going to discuss this here. We get all in one of their rooms and told them, you know, what the story was, and you guys broke the rules. And so and we won again. We beat Rutgers, which was great. So there was a reason to celebrate. That was a pretty good win for us at that time. And so we've got Ohio Wesleyan coming up to play us in Spartan Stadium on Wednesday. And I had, let me see, 8 out of my 10 starters were on the bench and never played. And there were probably 14 to 16 kids who never got on the field against Ohio Wesleyan. And the better part was we beat them, I think, 9-1, 9-2, something like that. And we played really well. And the kids that did play did a great job. One of the fortunate things, one was my goalie played. He was not drinking that night. So it was a lesson delivered, and it was a story for the next 3 or 4 years, and it carried through a little bit. So that was at the time, as a coach, you're sitting there saying, okay, you know, we beat Rutgers, but Ohio Wesleyan's pretty damn good too. So they're probably not as good as Rutgers, but are we as good as? Can we play 2 games in a row like that? And we did, which was outstanding. And so those kids learned a pretty valuable lesson, especially when some of them never decided to call their parents to tell them they were sitting on the bench that day. And a family from Pennsylvania drove all the way out because I think we might have had a home game on Saturday as well. And they drove out to see the Wednesday and Saturday game and couldn't understand why their kid didn't play. And when I said, listen, I'm not talking to your parents. You got to go tell them why you're not playing.
Wow.
All right. So some lessons learned, and you got to make those tough decisions. And it's a loss that probably would have hurt us, but we got the win, and so that was okay.
Right. I thought the 92 Brother Ice team was the only one that went down 7 starters going into a game, but that's a playoff story for another time. Colin, what's your other D1 coach to D1 coach follow-up question?
That was a good, though. I've been in that exact scenario with 6 kids, but that's for another time. What was the craziest overbearing parent, don't have to use a name, situation that you ever had to deal with?
You know, you're not going to believe this, Chris. Okay. It was the Druins when I didn't recruit their son. You know, they went nuts on me, man. Not really.
That was coming. I knew that was coming.
Yeah.
Good.
I'm going to tell you, in all honesty, I never had to deal with a bad parent.
Really?
Yeah. And here's part of the reason, okay? For the Michigan kids on my team, I think their parents were just happy they were playing in college. For the kids from out of town that were from the East Coast, which was probably in some years 2/3 of my team, those parents would come to a game and they were so happy to see their kid that they hadn't seen for a while that they didn't even bother to talking to me. They just wanted to hug their kid and talk to their kid. And and that kind of thing. So I just never had a lot of issues. My coaching staffs. I had some great assistant coaches when I was there. Boku Hendrickson was with me the whole time, and he was an All-American defenseman at Cortland and runner-up for Player of the Year in 70, 71, 72, somewhere around there. Great motivational coach, great with the kids. I mean, we just didn't have many problems. We just didn't. And I think that we were pretty transparent with parents about what we were doing and how we were doing it and how we made our decisions and that kind of thing. And so, I had parents question me, why isn't my kid playing more? But it was a good conversation, so I really didn't have to face that to not a screaming, raving parent who was all over my case. I just never had to face that.
Other than the Bruins.
Yeah, I've never really had it either, but I have great parents and you recruit the parents with the kids, right? They're all part
Absolutely.
of the same thing. And when you're sitting at all the recruiting events now, you just hear horror story after horror story of these crazy parents. And I always say, hey, I've got a great relationship. Yeah, they question playing time, but
Sure.
you give them an honest appraisal of the situation, and that's where we're at, and everybody accepts what's going on. So.
And I think that's it. And if you want to blow smoke up their butt when they ask you that question, it's going to come back to haunt you later on when the kid's done everything that you said to the parents. The kid went out and did everything, but it's still not enough to get him in there. It's hard to say to a parent who's not getting a full scholarship, not getting any money, whatever the case may be, to say, listen, I'm glad your son's here. He's a great teammate, but he's not a very good lacrosse player. And we're going to keep him because we want him as part of the team, and he's going to bring something different. But his playing time is going to be limited. That's hard for a parent to see or to hear. And so a lot of coaches just don't say that. Well, if he works in his left hand or he works on ground balls or gets a faster shot or gets stronger, that's all stuff you can see. And a parent can see that too. My kid bench presses 9 million pounds. What do you mean he's not strong enough? Well, he benches 9 million pounds, but his shot goes 3 miles an hour. So you got to be honest with them, best you can anyway.
To stay on the bench, the bench pressing, Coach, I had a couple things here from some of your former players at Brother Rice, and one of them had to do with bench pressing. And Mr. John Fry and Paul Cosgrove wanted to know if you were impressed with their bench pressing back in the day.
Not with his.
Not his.
Not with Cosgrove's. We were actually a pretty strong team in those days. We had a great weight training program. We lifted 4 days a week in the off season, and we lifted once or twice in season, depending on the schedule and the travel aspect of it. But we had one kid do 62 dips, and he had a tryout with a hockey team once he got here, and he actually got to play in the green-white game before they decided not to keep him, thankfully. But his forearms and his shoulders were huge. Kid from Long Island, and he was a really good lacrosse player for us.
I think people got to realize in college that, the weight room is the one place that you stay consistently all year. So we go 4 days a week, twice during the season. We have limited time in the fall. Right. During the spring, you're practicing at weird hours because you got to get everybody there, just as you guys did. But that one thing that you can do consistently all the time is the weight room. And that's what blows my mind with high school kids is they'd rather play in leagues and do pickup leagues over and over. They got to get a strength coach.
Yeah.
You got to work on your speed and your strength just as much as you work on your stick. So
we start at Lansing Catholic. We start after Labor Day, and we lift 2 days a week, and we do agility work for an hour 1 day a week. And then we do 4-player workouts around that. Then when we get to the end of fall sports, because we lose a lot of kids, we got a lot of football players, a lot of soccer players, tennis players, cross-country runners. So when we get to the end of that, our numbers, we only had, I think, 4 kids playing a winter sport this year. We had 3 hockey players, and we had 5 and 2 basketball players. So we then go to 3 days a week lifting. And we get in and out. We got a great strength coach. He's actually a teacher at the school and runs the weight room. So he pushes these guys. We have a program. They record every lift every rep, everything that is recorded. And then when we get to spring, we didn't lift last season during the year. And this year we were already started on our very first day of practice. They stayed after we get out of school at 3. They were in the weight room from 3:15 to about 3:50. Then we sent them home, and we had practice from 6:30 to 9 that night. And we were going to continue to do that all through the season with that 1 day a week and just kind of maintain what we were doing. So we've got a good strength program. It's made a real difference in how we play and the level that we can play at. And, last year we had a great season. And, I think it was one of the things that led to that was we were just a whole lot stronger than we'd ever been before.
Well, seniors this year too. It's with everything shutting down, that's got to be tough. For you. And just to jump over, because I know we got to wrap up pretty quick here, Chris Struan. But you're pretty well ingrained with the MHSA and what's going on. What do you? Are there going to be specific rules now that the season is really done? Is the MHSA going to run this as if it's like the summer starts now? Are there going to be specific rules? Are going to be a new? What's your take on what's going to happen? So once we get through this, if it's May 1st, where social distancing is gone, what's going to happen?
The normal is, I think it's the Monday. Is it the Monday after Labor Day or the week?
The dead zone. Yep.
The Monday after Memorial Day, which takes it into the next week. Everything's done. I think all the tournaments are done, and summer stuff can start in a normal year. Basketball, football,
right.
It becomes club lacrosse time. I could take my team to, I think, 15 tournaments in the summer or 15 games in the summer, whatever it is, 15 days.
15 days.
So I asked that question. We had a staff meeting on Zoom the other night with our AD and stuff, and that's one of the questions I asked. I said, I know we can't gather right now, but one of the things they told us when they shut it down to the end of the school year and they canceled their season is even when they first closed it and said, okay, schools are closed, you guys can't meet as a team. You can have meetings and talking to your kids. We want you to talk to your kids, but you're not doing any lifting together. You can do pretty much virtually anything you want to do, but how many kids have a rack in their house? How many kids have a goal in their backyard? There's several, but not a ton. So there was something that came out today, and I haven't read it but once, and I got to read it again. But I think they're saying as of June 1st, it's summer, and you can go. And if everything is released, if the governor, the state has said you can now go out and mingle, then you can go to whatever those guidelines are that the state puts out. So,
because when you look at, you got Ohio and Illinois out there right now that still haven't canceled their seasons, and the governors, they're optimistic that they're going to go back to school on May 4th. Everyone thinks that's crazy, and it very well could be crazy, but they've got a schedule out there to actually get games in, to get the playoffs in, and to have a state championship in the middle of June. And I'm thinking, well, if we're clean and it's safe come May 4th, can I don't know. I mean, is it possible for a team from Michigan to go down and play a game against a team from Ohio?
That's a great question, and I'm not sure it wasn't in that thing that I got today from our AD, that I just read it briefly and got on to doing something else. So that was the gist of my question. If tomorrow they lifted all restrictions and we could all get together, are we in summer mode so we can go play? Because you've canceled our seasons, you're not going to reinstate it. So tell me when summer starts so we can go do. Well, right now I think it's as of June 1st, and I don't think that is. If I might have the wrong date, but whatever the Monday after Memorial Day is,
all right,
that would be the normal summer date where you could go do stuff. And honestly,
if that's public information, or you want to, I'd love to see what.
No, I think it is public information. I think it was an update from the MHSAA today.
Okay.
Athletic director. So coaches.
I'll be on it tonight.
Yeah, he'll dig through it. He'll find it.
We're going to try and play one more time against somebody so we can have a senior night. And I've talked to Mike Antwerp and Adam Zarotny. We've talked about a little round robin that the first night we'd go to Hazlitt and play, and they could do their senior night, and Hazlitt would go to Okemos and they could do their senior night. Then Okemos would come to us and we'd do our senior night. So we'd all get a couple of games in.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
Good. Okay.
two kind of follow-up questions as we try to keep these about an hour. We go over whatever. Best memory on the field as a coach, as a player in college, in high school, anything. What's kind of one of those memories that you'd love to share?
I'll give you two, and one's a real short one. The first one is when we got selected to go to the NCAA tournament in 1989. That's something that we will never forget, and we were good enough to go well, actually it was 87. I'm sorry, and then we went again in 89 and 91. But I think the best game was we took a bus out to Delaware, who was ranked, I think, 12th in the country at that point in time. We get out there. We were supposed to have a practice time. We pull into the parking lot at their stadium, and we're about a half an hour late getting there, and everybody was gone. We couldn't get into the stadium. We couldn't get on the field. So the guys changed in the bus, and the parking lot was empty. And we did a full field walkthrough in the parking lot. We didn't have goals. We couldn't shoot or anything, but we could walk through our rides and clears. We could walk through our offense. We could talk about the tendencies and that kind of thing. So, then we went out, had dinner, went back to the hotel, got up the next day, and they were good. They were, 12th ranked team in the country at that time. And Bob Schilling, was the coach, did a nice job with them. So we get out there, and it's a great game. It's a really well played game. And one of our parents, unbeknownst to all of us, I think, hired a videographer to film the game.
Oh, wow.
With a high-quality camera, not the little dinky thing we had, and it looked like you were 8 miles away and everything else. So the game ended up, we were down 2 with 3 minutes left to go. They came down, and instead of trying to kill the last 2.5 minutes or whatever it was we took a bad shot, and they got the ball and came down. We stripped the ball, got back to my goalie, who hit Jerry Rio out of Catholic Central on a fast break, and Jerry's coaching their freshman team now, and he's fast. And we hit him on a fast break, just a classic 4-on-3 fast break. Moved the ball, got it down to the low man on the far side, and stuck it right in the top corner. So now it's 1 goal. I think it's 9-8 or 8-7, whatever. And so we're within 1. We lose the face-off. They come down. We force a bad shot, goes out of bounds. We beat them to the end line. So now there's maybe 21, 23 seconds left to go in the game. So we call a timeout, and we set up a couple things. We started the ball on the end line with Johnny Lancey, who was really fast, and he had Rio on the other side. So if he had to throw across field, we had it speed going to speed. We were sure they were going to at least put some pressure on us. And they put their attackman right across the restraining line. And they weren't covering our attackman real tight, just off him like a normal situation. And so Lancey comes up the field, and one of our attackmen makes a Wayne Sanseverino from Long Island, makes a break up to the midfield, and Lancey hits him on a line, and he turns around and throws it to a kid named Mark Saracine, who's out of upstate New York, who is just inside the box and rips one with 3 seconds left in the top corner of the net to tie the game. Actually, I take that back. The first goal tied the game. We were down by 1, tied the game, and we won the game with 3 seconds left to go, so we didn't have to go into overtime. So it was amazing. The benches emptied. We had a huge crowd there because most of our kids in the East Coast. Yeah. It was phenomenal. It was just probably the most exciting game I've been involved with as a coach.
So if this parent had a professional film crew there, where is this videotape, and why is it not on YouTube?
That's a great question. It might be on YouTube. Van Antwerp put up our game against Syracuse from 1993. It's on YouTube, which is a fun one to watch because we go up 3-0, and David Rivers, as the long stick midi comes down, nobody picks him up, and he's about halfway into the box and rips him to the top corner, go up 3-0. We should have pulled the plug on the lights. We should have got the bus and gone home. And at that point, the commentators on Syracuse TV are talking, the committee's meeting down in Baltimore, wherever they are, Syracuse wins this game. They're number one in the country. They're going to get number one seed, and all of a sudden it's 3-0 and they're losing. The guy goes, well, maybe that meeting's going to take a little bit longer. And we hung with them for about 2.5 periods. We played zone the whole game, and it was 14-7, I think, in the middle of the third quarter. And it's one of those ones you're really, really not happy with. You end up losing 26-14. So they finally woke up and beat the zone, and we just couldn't stay with them man-to-man. I mean, their 3 midfielders are all first-team All-Americans that year, Roy Colsey and a couple others. So it was a great experience. I'll tell you that the coaches up at Syracuse, Roy Simmons was awesome. They came out and played us here. It was hard to get teams to come out and play us. Tom Hayes was good. He came out with Rutgers one time. But Slugger was down in Florida. They were playing in Florida. They flew to Detroit, and we had 2 feet of snow, and they almost didn't get here from Detroit. And so we played the game in Duffy. The only time a lacrosse game was ever played in there. It was packed. They said there were probably close to 1,000 people in there lining the sidelines. No bleachers, no nothing.
Wow.
It was a great game. It was a great game to have Syracuse there, and they beat the snot out of us. So
there's a trivia question.
To play them, and they were always respectful, and it was great games. We just weren't in that category, but to bring them out, Hopkins. Donnie Zimmerman brought Hopkins out in the fall one year. We played in the stadium in front of about 5,000 people, and Nick Chavillo in a Hopkins uniform was on the cover of our media guide the next year. So that was kind of fun too.
I remember that. I
remember that too. I think my first Michigan State game as a fan was you guys playing Michigan at Country Day in about 88, 89.
Yeah, we played them. I remember we played them over there. Yep. We did some things with Michigan to try and grow the game a little bit and that kind of stuff. And it was a good rivalry, and they had some excellent lacrosse players. And it's one of those things where you try and make your young kids understand, listen, every one of you guys can run faster than they can, but they will move the ball past you every single time. And they were fun games. And then finally we just got to be good enough that it just wasn't a game anymore. So we stopped playing, which was fine. They were good with that, and we were good with that.
And I teased about, not being recruited by you, but, in the era of Chris now being a road warrior in a folding chair at all these tournaments, looking for the younger kids, and I imagine in your era it was more going and working camps to get exposure to kids. Do you think the old way was better? Do you think the new way is better? Would you want to be recruiting in this era?
Maybe. What I'll say is, when our season was done, it was always the first weekend in May. And I would then get in my car, or a school car some years when I actually had some money to do that, and I would be May, June, and maybe even in July, and come back home after the Empire State games. And I would go to upstate New York, and it was their tournament time or even regular season games, and I would go watch as many games as I could. My college roommate lived up outside Rochester, so I could stay with him. I had a key to his house, and I could see games in Buffalo, Rochester, Syracuse. I'd stay there for if there's some good games. I would go down to Philadelphia, where one of our alums that was a club lacrosse player who's become one of my best friends, and I had a key to his house. And then in Baltimore, I didn't know a lot of people, so I'd grab a hotel, or I just wouldn't stay overnight. I'd drive back up to Philly. I'd go up through Connecticut. My family's from Massachusetts, so I could see. I would just be on the road. I'd put 5,000 or 6,000 miles on a car in the summertime, and I could see these kids play. And then what I would do is I would send them letters. I would call back to my secretary, give a kid's name, the high school address, send them letter 1, send them letter 2, send them letter 3, whatever it is. And then I'd try and do some school visits, because school was still in business, so I could get into their schools. And if a kid was really interested, then if it was later into June and they were still around, I'd do a home visit if I thought it was somebody I wanted. And I'd get a lot of that stuff done all in the summertime. And then in July, it was, work top 205. You go down, you'd get all the information. You do a college night, so you'd spend the day. You could stay overnight if you wanted to work the next day. I'd go down and really do a day, and then I'd be off to another camp. I'd go up to Top Star at that time at Gettysburg with Hank Jancic. And usually I'd stay there for a week. The kids at top 205, the chances of me getting those kids at that time was not really good. but I wrote to a lot of them and I encouraged a lot of them and had some interest out of some. But up at Gettysburg, it was kind of the next tier, and I did pretty well at that camp, so that was fun. I worked at Peak 200 up in Massachusetts to get New England kids, and you know, Peak 200 was good because they actually paid you. You'd stay the whole week, and you do a college night one night and that kind of. But you were there you made the commitment to stay the whole week. At Gettysburg, you could stay as long as you wanted, and they'd feed you, and Carl Runk would tell stories till 2 o'clock in the morning. He'd be exhausted the next morning and have to get out and coach some more. But the camps, when you can see a kid play a whole game with his own team, and I think that kind of translates to kids who are on club teams that have been on that same club team and they know the kids even though they're not from the own school. They seem to be a lot more comfortable when you do that. But you go to a place that's got kids in your recruiting age that you're looking at, whatever it is, and they're playing on 12 different fields, and you want to see them all. You're making some really quick snap judgments. Now, film is a huge thing now that helps. In those days, there was no film. I mean, there was a dad with a video camera, you know, that was turned off half the time, or he was screaming so loud that it was obnoxious to watch. But so I'm not sure which way I'd rather do it. I enjoyed what I did before. For me, being from the East Coast, it connected me with a lot of people I never saw over the course of the year. So that was kind of fun. It added a little more to it. Then I was coaching field hockey for 7 years at the same time in the 80s at Michigan State, and they had scholarships, which I didn't have in lacrosse, and they actually had a recruiting budget. So I found a lot of field hockey players that went to the same high schools as lacrosse players. And actually that was Pennsylvania, it was Maryland, it was upstate New York. So if you look at the roster where I got most of my field hockey players from, they were from those areas, and a lot of times I had kids, a lacrosse player and a field hockey player from the same school, which was pretty cool.
Hey, double dip if the budget's right.
Yeah, no kidding. It came out of the field hockey budget rather than the lacrosse budget for a few years, so that was nice.
Yeah, the reason why I ask is, you know, I came up in the era, so did Chris, where you actually went out to these camps. They put you up in the dorms. They dropped you into a team. You know, mornings were open fundamentals, and then you'd be a break, and then you'd go and do position-specific stuff. Then there'd be dinner, and then there'd be a late-night game, and then swimming and film and everything else. And I got so much development out of that. That's the only way I got recruited, is because I was out at the Army camp, and you know, Emmer noticed me there. Yeah. I look at what my son, who's 9 now, is going into, and it seems even at this age, we're getting hit up for travel teams. Are you interested in travel teams? Yeah. And I think that overnight camp, going and spending 6 days on a college campus, living in the dorms, eating in the cafeteria, you know, I still think there's a lot of value in that. It seems like those camps have just disappeared. Yeah, they're coming back a little bit. There's a spotlight camp that Jimmy Stagnita, the coach of the Whipsnakes, is doing in Towson in July. He hopes it's going to go, but one is a overnight camp. It's like 2.5 days for younger kids, and then there's a 22-23 camp, which is a recommended camp. But they got some great people that are going to coach there, and I've got a couple of kids that can't afford $1,500, $2,000. And so what they're going to do is they're just going to go to prospect days as they come up for schools where it's maybe 95 or 100, and they can maybe do 5 or 6 of those. And I've got a defenseman who I think is and Chris is listening, I hope, who I think is a Division I lacrosse player. He's 6'4". He's about 210. He's a starting defensive end on our football team.
21 or 22?
Huh?
21 or 22?
He's a 22.
21?
Yeah.
22, good.
He's a sophomore. He's a 22. Right?
We will have a lot of opportunities for defensemen in the 22 class. So.
Yeah, he's a big, strong kid. He was down a country day when the Cherries did a thing in I don't know, November, December, right after football.
I know who he is.
Yeah. And
I know who he is.
So he's not playing on a club team. I mean, Cherries have offered him a chance to come down and practice with him if he wants. I think he's going to do that. And PLG wants to take him to Chicago with him because he played for them last year. But, you know, the price tag. He's got right now. There's 3 brothers all in Catholic school. He's got a brother that's going into college. He's got a brother's, and there 2 of them are still going to be in Catholic school. So it's a tough sell for them. So, but I love the camp system. I think that the club teams are good, and some of them do a great job, and they actually coach the kids when they get them in practice, and they make them better lacrosse players. And some practice 1 day a week, and in that they maybe scrimmage and do maybe a ride in the clear, and then they get in the game and they just let the kids play, which is also fun. But if you're recruiting a kid, I think it's a little harder to see that kid and see what he actually knows, because it's run and gun. If I want to see defensemen, I want to see defensemen working one-on-one and close into the crease. I want to see him working off the ball. I don't want to see him playing fast breaks the whole time. I want to see some of that. But, I mean, I want to see these kids work at their game, at their skill. And their skill for most kids now is so much better than it ever was. The sticks make a huge difference, but they work at it a lot more. And a lot of them are just lacrosse players and that kind of thing. But in the camp, you get to know the kids. You get to see them every day. You coach your own team, so you develop some relationships with kids that maybe would never look at your school, but maybe 1 or 2 of them will. But because you were there for a whole week and you saw them 3 or 4 times a day, ate lunch with them, ate dinner with them, I liked that system. I think as long as you have good coaches, my grandson lives in Massachusetts, and he started playing lacrosse last year in 8th grade. He was on the 8th grade B team, which was a perfect spot for him. But so I got out after our season was over and got to see him play in his very last game. And they had 2 practices a week and a game every week, or maybe 2 games on a Saturday, whatever it was. And I watched him cover a kid the entire time behind the cage when the ball was at the midfield, when the ball was on the wing attackman, and he was covering the kid behind the cage the whole time. So after the game, I said to him, "Why do you cover that kid back there?" He said, "Well, the coach told me to guard my man." Never told him to move up to the goal line extended. Never told him to be back. Didn't not. It was 8th grade B, and it was, I understand that. So I brought him out here this summer to stay here with me for a week at our house, and we were in a cottage over in Holland, and there was a camp going on over in Grand Rapids. So I took him to the camp, and it was a 4-day camp. It was from 9 in the morning till 4 in the afternoon, and it was probably the most poorly run camp I'd ever seen. He did one, and I stayed there all day because it was 45 minutes back to where we were staying, and I was going to drive home and drive back again. And I wanted to see what they were doing and what they were teaching them. And they were college kids that were coaching, and good kids, looked like good lacrosse players, but they never opened their mouth. And a couple of older guys that did stuff just said, "Okay, time, move this team, this group, move over here and go over there." And every group had to sit for an hour without doing anything. And I'm going, "You're an hour, you're just sitting there." And so, I told him, "Get up and play off the wall, play catch or something, do something." And he wanted to fit in, so everybody else is sitting down, so he's sitting down, and it was a big waste of money, and but you don't know that going in, so, and it was by people that I thought would have known better, so that was disappointing.
I don't know what Colin's experience was, but I remember even back at Country Day, and I think it was 91, 92, Tony Seaman and Bill Tierney came to Country Day, and they brought Dave Petramala and Dave Morrow with them to be our campers and our clinicians.
Yeah.
And I remember, like you said, you'd show up on campus, and I remember specifically with the Army camp, and Mac Dan's the defensive coordinator, is your position coach, is the guy recruiting you, is the guy that's going to be your counselor all week, is going to take you on the entire West Point campus tour and everything. Like, that was a recruiting trip and an official visit per se, and all that stuff. And I just think now some of these kids, they might not get on campus until, I don't know.
Guys, I'll tell you exactly why you don't do it anymore. Liability.
Really?
People can't be responsible. I mean, we're in a different time and age, and people, the burden of taking kids overnight, in a sports kind of situation, you're asking for a lot of issues. That's why a lot of colleges have backed away from the sports side of it. They still do some overnight camps with, sciences and stuff like that, but that's, the day camp is becoming part of it purely because colleges don't want to deal with the overnight of having minors in their buildings.
Well, and you gotta put chaperones up there. You gotta have people that are going to be responsible enough to make sure these kids are in bed and the lights are off, and they're college kids, so they can't be drinking in the hallways and thinking that they're running the dorms and that kind. I understand that entirely. Yeah.
Jesus, I just can't even imagine trying to get the food allergies and the prescriptions into that camp.
Yeah, with social media and everything, these kids can communicate that counselors that would have no idea what's going on, and they'd get away with murder. So it's a thing of the past, I think.
Good point.
It makes sense. Bums me out because, like I said, I loved those days, and it was great for my development and my recruitment and all that other stuff. I don't want to sit in the lawn chair watching my son, on club teams as much as I think that something like that might be fun for him, but that's just me being selfish as a dad. We're at about an hour and a half. Any parting shots, Coach Kimball, at me, at Chris, at Losi, at Michigan State?
No, not at all. Listen, I've been coaching lacrosse. I told some of my kids the other night when I talked to my seniors that I started playing lacrosse in 1965, so it's been 55 years with a slight hiatus after Michigan State when I was a high school athletic director. But when I got back to Lansing, I started coaching again as an assistant, being an AD, and it's a great sport. It's done a ton for me, and my goal is just to hope that kids that play for me or kids I coach in camp or whatever have a great experience and learn to love the game as much as I do. And if we all think like that and get these kids to go, and if we don't do what's best for us, but we do what's best for them, then the sport will continue to grow. And as we begin to get selfish and say this is all about me and not about the kid, then we're going in the wrong direction and we're going to see our numbers go down.
Yeah. Well, on that note, I'll wrap it up by saying, everyone, go join US Lacrosse. It's uslacrosse.org. There's a Join Now button. Follow us on Twitter, USL_Michigan. Check out our YouTube page. Follow us on Facebook, at chriscolin.com, at laxlosi.com are their Twitters. Coach, are you on Twitter?
Absolutely.
Oh, what's your Twitter handle?
I don't know. I'd have to look at it. I don't post anything. I just steal stuff from everybody else and retweet it. And then I send it out to my kids.
He's a voyeur.
I'll tweet Doug Jolly and find out what it is. I'm sure he knows, or Van Antwerp will.
And coach, I've got the MHSAA release form up here. I was texting some people, so they pulled it up for me. So I may reach out to you to decipher exactly what's going on, because really they're talking about June 1st, but what happens in May?
I think what their thought is, we are all locked down.
Right.
I think in everybody's mind, because schools are closed.
No buildings, right?
No buildings, no facilities. So I think kids in this state are locked down until that gets lifted. So the question is, our seniors graduate May 11th or 12th. Can they go congregate now? Can I work with my seniors at that point? There's just a lot of questions that haven't been answered yet that I don't think some of them probably haven't even been thought of at this point.
Well, and I thought about it, Coach. Could I take a senior class from School A and a senior class from School B together and play a senior class from School C and School D?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, and I'm saying if that's the case, then we can put the Hazlitt, Okemos, and Lansing Catholic kids together, split them up and have a game, and it's everybody's senior night that night.
Exactly.
So yeah, there's just a lot of questions that I don't think are answered yet. So.
Okay. Well, I may reach out to you, Coach, to decipher this.
So. Yeah, that's fine. That's fine.
Find him on Twitter. So, all right, guys, I'm heading to bed.
Coach, guys,
this was awesome.
Kimball, great job. Thanks for being here.
Hey, Coach.
All right, guys, thanks.
See ya.